Hey there, welcome to my continuing series on building a Simon game. If you've been following along, you should be pretty much where I am right now. So you'll see my scene here now has a black background. All I've done is change the main camera to a solid color, and I've set the background to black. By default, it's blue. And I've modified the materials on some of these objects here so they're a little shiny. They look a little more like plastic buttons. I have them set as the standard PBR materials, as opaque. The metallic property is turned down somewhat. This could be rounded up to 0.2, and then the smoothness is basically 0.75. So other than that, everything should be the same. You click on each button, you'll see they change their colors. You can double click. It still doesn't matter. Our basic architecture is the same as what we discussed before. We have an empty game object that defines all the buttons. We have an empty game object that defines the two players. We've got the player, which is you. And then we've got Simon, which is the AI player. I haven't changed anything here. Right now, the player raycasts a ray straight into the scene from the camera. Based on screen space, shoots it out into 3D space. Whatever it hits, it activates, it finds the button script on that, or the button component on that object, and then fires off its activate method. The Simon player, right now, all he does is continually tries to find a new button to press. So his logic isn't very complicated. You'll see all he does is take his turn. You send in a number of choices, and he returns those choices back to what will eventually be the game script. This tutorial, I'm going to just give you a quick brief overview of something I like to call something called LeanTween, which I like to use in most of my projects for basic animations. LeanTween is a free asset that you can download on the asset store. Now, all of my tutorials I've been trying to do without any extra components or without any pre-built stuff, so that anybody following along who's new to Unity or who doesn't want to go out and buy a bunch of assets can just start from my tutorials without having to do anything special. LeanTween is free, so you don't have to pay for it. You can download it and install it. And it's a really robust animation package for Unity. I'm going to do a really quick little thing, but you can do so much more with LeanTween. So I'll see if I can give you an overview and then just make these buttons kind of scale up and then scale down, or we can try a depress and a pressed action, or depress state and a press state. But there's so much more you can do with LeanTween and coroutines. So you can make a really nice animation. You can kind of finish off your interactives, your games with some nice animations that really add polish. You notice I just said the word polish, and I'm introducing this right now. This game is nowhere near done. So we're nowhere near a polished state, but I had enough time to just go over a really quick thing right now, so I figured I'd go ahead and throw this in. Normally you would spend your time developing your animations after you've gotten all the functionality in place, which means that we would have made our game script, we would have our player reporting his turns back to the game script, we would have Simon reporting his turns back to the game script. We'd even have a menu system built out, and maybe we could have a high score. So we haven't really defined a lot of these things, so I'm not really that worried about introducing LeanTween right now, but in the course of this tutorial series we will go over other things that are more complex, like the game script and a menu system, and saving some high scores. But for now, again, we're going to do LeanTween. So here we go. So LeanTween basically imports a utility that's a static utility that allows you to add animations at any point in time throughout your game, throughout any scripts really. And I'm going to select the player because the player is the one that we are able to control. I'm going to say, okay, anytime you hit a button by clicking on the screen, you activate the button script. So here in activate, what happens is we call this coroutine called change object color, and in here the color changes. So a couple things you can do instead of just a straight color change. You could do a LeanTween from one color to another. We'll go ahead and do this. Tween our color change. And so there's a lot of ways you can do this. So if you just call LeanTween, again, this just has a bunch of static methods in it, so you can tween all sorts of things. And if you look at all of the static methods here, there are quite a few. So I can LeanTween a color if I want. So I'll go ahead and do that. So game object, and I'll say the color black is what we want to tween to, and we want to tween over, we'll say 5 or half a second. Now there's another nice feature to LeanTween is that you can add on some more methods. So if you just add a dot or period at the end, then you can go ahead and add on more methods here. So I'm going to add some easing, set ease, and I give it an enumeration type. I like to ease in, out. If I type that in right, in, out, sign. That's what I want to ease with. So then I'll go ahead and just for now I'm going to comment that out. And then once I'm done, I'm going to want to tween it back. So let's see. Go ahead and tween it back. We want to tween it back to our original color, which we called button color. And I'll comment that out. Okay, so we've got 2 tweens here. They both take half a second, so our total time would be, and then there's also a delay here of 1 second. So it'd be half a second to get to our color. This is going to wait. So it's going, this is another thing you need to worry about here. When you run a coroutine, and then you also include LeanTweens, your LeanTween will take half a second, but this will fire off immediately, and then it'll jump to this line right after this fires off. So it would tween for half a second. This would wait for a full second, but by the time this got to half a second, we'd be pretty much halfway through this wait, and then we'd fire this one off. So if we want to give this approximately half a second, we could add a half a second here. Again, there's a small delay depending on what's going on with your PC, how fast your frame rate is, all that kind of stuff. But if you roughly add in the same amount of time or buffer it even more, then you're pretty sure to get at least the time that you want here. So okay, so I've added those 2 simple lines into my code. I'm going to go ahead and play this and test it. Now we can see the color shift should be a smoother gradual transition from blue to black or red to black, and then back. So now, just like we had our coroutine issue where you can double click on something and the coroutine will get stuck in a color, LeanTweens also do the same. They'll fire off multiple animation tweens trying to tween between one color and another, and that you can see there's some stutter if I keep pressing on that. So that may not be very nice. So one way to solve that is to do something similar to what we did with our previous coroutine. So you can LeanTween.cancel, and you can send in the game object that the tween is on. So we'll just cancel on this game object. Now we don't have to cancel this one because this is on the same game object. So ideally this animation has not finished, or has finished by the time this one fires off. If we were to cancel this, cancel any tweens on this game object before this tween had canceled, then we wouldn't have our full color fade to black. And if as well, if there wasn't enough time between this tween and this tween, then we would go to black and then all of a sudden start going back to a different color before we got to black. So anyways, there we go. We're canceling it now. We'll go back here. We'll hit play. Go ahead and do that. It still looks as nice. If I double click, I shouldn't be getting it, but actually I am. I'm getting a little stutter there. And that'll be more evident with the next thing I do as well. So what's happening actually is that anytime this activate is firing off, our coroutine is canceled, and then a new coroutine is started. And we could just as easily add a flag. So bool is animating. We'll set that to false. We could do this, is animating equals true. And then at the end is animating equals false. Now we can also go ahead and delete these lines that we saved. So now we'll check if we are animating, and if we are, we will just return if is animating, and return out of this. So if we're animating, we're not going to activate this button. So let's test that real quick. And that should get rid of our stutter there. So no stutter. Okay. So you can see it's looking pretty smooth already. This is kind of nice. Another thing, like I mentioned earlier, we might want to try is a pressed or depressed state. So we can do a LeanTween.move local, and we can try the Z. So we want to push the object back. Lean object, and we'll move it back, let's say 3 units. And I'm just doing this off the, out of the blue. I'm not sure if this is going to look good or not. But we'll do this. We'll give it a shot. We'll say -3. We pushed it back 3, and then we're pulling it back out another 3. So let's go ahead and test that. So we hit play. And 3 is clearly way too far. It's also moving way too close to the camera. Okay. So let's try a lot less. Let's try push this in local space. You know what? One easy way to do this is to just hit the play button. Grab one of your buttons, we'll say the blue button here, and watch your inspector. So we want to move this back. I want to make sure I have my blue handle selected. So let's say we want it to go back just a slight bit. Let's say plus 0.2. So we'll do 0.2. We'll do 0.2, and actually what's happening here, which I forgot, is that this is moving to an absolute position. So we moved it to -3, which pushed it beyond the position where we started. So we want it to come back to 0. So there we go. Okay. So that's kind of cool. So now the trick is not to get stuck in multiple states or in between animation states, because that can start to look bad. And this is something we'll also have to worry about when we're playing. We don't want the user to submit multiple times to the game engine. Well, maybe we do. We'll have to work out the prototype and see exactly what we need. At this point, you can see that the animation looks smooth. It's nice, but we might want to work on the timing of this animation. Maybe these buttons take too long to press and depress. So, or maybe those are things that we want to expose publicly so that the game engine or the game logic can switch the speed at which these buttons come up and down as the game gets more complex or more difficult. But already, I think you can see some interesting interactivity here that maybe you can also translate to other games, maybe even a menu system. This LeanTween tool, I've only shown you two different static methods to tween with, but there's so many other things you can do with it. If you just take a look at the LeanTween library, you'll see that, you know, not just moving, but you've got scaling, you've got color, you even got a nice value that you can affect. And then if you're doing something and you want to update things while one of your tweens is happening, you can LeanTween. Let's say we were doing a color tween game object. And let's just say we're going to change it to color dot yellow or color dot, I don't know, purple. We're going to do that over 0.25. We can do set on update, and we can just send in the value here. And during our update loop, we can essentially call any part of our, let's say, get component, any part of our scene. We can do anything while this game object is updating its color property. So if I want to get the render, the material, set, I want to set a, what do I want to set? I want to set a float. I think it's called emissive. I want to set that value to 1, or maybe I want to set it to 10 just to be crazy. Let's see if we set it to value. And what's wrong here? Purple does not exist. Color.p. Let's do color dot, let's pick another one. Magenta. There we go. Color dot magenta. We'll do value times 10. That should be crazy. Should be really crazy. And this isn't going to set the value back, so we should have some issue happen here. There you go. But so it's trying to change the emissive property on, and you can see my emission here. Let's see if that's actually updating. It may not be updating because maybe I'm not calling the right property here. So let's see. Emission color. That's what we want. Emission color. So let's give that a shot now. Go ahead and restart. Select our blue object. Expand that so we can see it. Did that change? No, it didn't. Maybe I didn't spell that right. Let's try it one more time. E-M-I-S-S-I-O-N color. E-M-I-S-S-I-O-N color. Yeah, that's right. Let's try and explicitly set it to 10. That's not going to work. You need to do something with value. Debug log val. Could be that the value we're getting in here is the full color. Why don't we do this? Color C equals val. Like that. Okay. Let's check its emissive property. Maybe that's what it is. I need to set the emission color to val because that's a color that it takes. I really want the emission, instead of the emission color, I want the emission. Yeah, let's try the emission color. Sure. C, why isn't that coming in? Because this is a float. Set color. Right there, okay. Been a long day. Let's give this a shot. There we go. So that emission is pretty bright. Let's see if we do this in here instead. Instead of setting it to black, we'll go ahead and set this to our emission color. Okay. There we go, the emission color is taking over. You can see it does get set to black. It gets set to purple actually, or magenta right away. So we could just as easily set this update something else right here. Just set it back down to 0 really. Well, anyway, I think you get the point. You can work on this, try and refine this at another point. Like I said, this is really something you do in the polish phase, developing your game. Where I work now, we work in 3 phases. You work on alpha, which gets all your functionality in, still has bugs, doesn't have all the animations. Once you've got your functionality in place, then you work on your your beta phase, which starts to get some animations in, gets your bugs updated, and then you work on the master phase, which is where you really polish everything. You add in your sound effects, you make sure your animations look right, you fix any remaining bugs, and then you do your delivery to the client. So anyways, okay, you can see here animation looks nice, everything looks good. Another thing I didn't talk about before, but since we've created these buttons and we've architected this so that the player just fires off a series of rays, you can really create as many buttons as you want. I don't want red, let's say green and blue. So you can create as many of these buttons as you want and everything will still work. It's kind of a nice feature of this architecture. So you could think of like making a keyboard or making some kind of kids game where you've got to pick certain colors. I don't know. Sky's the limit. I know this seems pretty basic right here, but really you can see that all sorts of interesting things, interesting possibilities are opening up already. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. This was all about LeanTween. Hopefully you got excited about using LeanTween, and hopefully that little taste of putting LeanTween in just to make your buttons move and change colors was really interesting. Everything I showed you right there only works on 3D objects. LeanTween does have the capability of affecting 2D objects, although sometimes it gets a little trickier. But I suggest using LeanTween as much as you can. Once you get the hang of it, I think it really does give you a lot quicker way into making animations as opposed to lerping in the update loop or trying to use coroutines for everything. So yeah, there's another plugin called Tween, which is also like LeanTween. It's a little more advanced. It gives you capability of stringing a bunch of animations together. The free version, I think, is pretty capable. However, it does give you a prompt every time you start a project and when you pass it on. I think LeanTween, just being free and open, is a little more accessible. It's not as fancy, but it certainly does the job. I mean, with 3 lines of code, you can see how much nicer this is. Okay, I'll see you in the next tutorial.